382. All right. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. We finished up chapter 4 last week, I imagine. Turn that down a little bit. Speaking in chapter 4, he's speaking of the sin that those find themselves in. As many as come out of the world, many have gone back into the world. And Peter here in chapter 4, the last part of chapter 4, he's making an exhortation to them. He says, "Let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or as an evildoer, as a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name." Of course, that's certainly an example to us today, an exhortation to us today. If we suffer as a Christian, don't be embarrassed by it. If we're persecuted for being Christian, don't be embarrassed by it. Don't allow that to shame you. Rather glorify in it, because we're doing so on behalf of Jesus Christ. We're doing on behalf of the name of God. All right, verse 17, and we'll get into chapter 5. "For it is time for judgment to begin at the household of God. And if it begins with us, and sometimes it does, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God?" Well, we understand the answer to that question. The world doesn't understand the answer to that question, but we certainly do. What happens to us? All right? What will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? Eternal what? It's an eternity of something. It's either an eternal punishment or it's an eternal reward. And for those who do not obey the gospel of God, it is, of course, eternity of punishment. Verse 18, "And if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner?" Well, that's you think about that. That's a question that it begs the answer. If the righteous is scarcely saved, and we are, the gospel of Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus Christ, is sufficient for our sins. But even that, and he's using a turn of phrase here, even that scarcely covers it. So if being baptized into Christ and coming in contact with His blood is scarcely sufficient, what is going to happen to those who do not come in contact with it at all? What is the end result of those people? What does the Scripture tell us? Those people will be cast into eternal punishment. All right. So he said, and all of that finishes up in verse 19. "Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good." All right. So if we're going to suffer, let us suffer according to God's will. Let us not suffer in the flesh because of our own misdeeds. Let us suffer in the Spirit because we're doing right when the world counts it as foolishness or wrong. All right. And that's what we do as Christians, man. We suffer, right? We do suffer, whether sometimes I think we gloss over our own suffering. Does it grieve us? When Paul went to the church in Rome, when he was finally taken to Rome, Paul would walk around the city of Rome. He wasn't always in prison. He would walk around. He would see this pagan idolatrous city, and he was grieved in his very soul by what he saw, because it was idolatry, idolatry, idolatry. We look around and we see some of the billboards, we see some of the advertisements, and we're offended by them, aren't we, by some of the things that we see. They're offensive to us. As Christians, we look at them and we think, that's not something that should be shown to the general public. Okay, certainly shouldn't be on a billboard next to the side of the road. And we think about those things. As Paul went into Rome, if you ever look at some of the really hard-hitting documentaries of life in that time, the idolatry was of such that there were things that would have been on display and visible to the person that as a devout, certainly as one who used to be a devout Jew, which certainly he would be utterly offended by it. The sexual immorality and that being on display would have been something that would have offended him to his very core. It certainly would have us. And here it is. He's offended by the very presence of what he sees. Not only that, being a faithful servant of God, he sees the idolatry going on, and he's offended by that as well. And here it is. Is that how we feel? In that way, we are, right? We suffer. We suffer. We see the things that are going on, and it grieves us to our very core. Our souls are suffering. We lament at what we see in the world today. I think we do. As Christians, we do. We see what people do, we see what people say, we see how people profane the Word of God, and it grieves us to see it. All right? So when we do that, let us suffer according to God's will, and let those who suffer according to God's will, which is us, entrust our souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. So as we maintain our conscience, as we maintain our integrity, as we maintain our morality and our ethics, we are going to be grieved. And the reason that we're grieved is because we are doing what is right. That's why we're offended. That's why we're hurt. That's why we suffer. All right. So getting into chapter 5, he switches gears a little bit, and he begins to speak here to the elders, the shepherds of the flock. Look what he says. He says, "So I exhort the elders among you." Now he's writing to the Christians, and he's writing to a particular. As these letters were being read, they would be read by a specific congregation. They would receive these letters, and while the faithful were attending services, while they were gathered together in the assembly, this letter would be read out. All right. So as these people are reading this, as the local church would be reading that, he's exhorting who? The elders who are among that church. All right. He's exhorting the elders who are in that congregation, wherever that congregation is. Today, if he was writing, it would be to this congregation or to the congregation down the road, wherever it is. So I exhort the elders among you. And that idea of elder, what do we think of when we think of the word elder? As Christians, we think of what? Yeah, we think of the bishop. We think of the episcopos. We think of the pastor. We think of the elder, the presbyter, the elder, the shepherd. I like that word probably better even than elder. Okay. But here he's writing to those men. This is who he's speaking of. Not just simply the men who are older, but those who have what? Control over a congregation, have leadership over that congregation. So he says, so I exhort you. And I don't just exhort you as a member of the Lord's body. He said, I exhort you as a fellow elder. I know what you're going through. I understand. I too am in a position of authority. He says, so I exhort you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ. And here he's kind of bringing up his own experience. I've seen what happens. I've been there. I was there when it happened. I saw all of these things. I was a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a what? What's a word? Verse 1, a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in what? What is the glory that's going to be revealed? What's the glory that's going to be revealed? What are we going to see? Christ is going to be revealed in His glory. He is going to come back. He is not coming to this earth. He's going to receive us. He's going to gather us to Himself in the air. So now, I want you to think about this for just a couple of seconds when we read this. He's a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. What this means is that Peter was absolutely 100% sure of his final destination. He knew beyond a shadow of a doubt where he was going to spend eternity. He knew he was going to be a partaker in that glory. This is a lesson to us today because I talk to too many people who feel that they can't quite know if they're right. I've talked to too many people who feel that they're never quite sure of everything. They don't know 100% where they're going to spend eternity. They believe they know. They think they've done everything that they're supposed to do. I'm talking about members of the Lord's church. They think they are. They're pretty sure they are. They're 92% positive that they are. But they're not 100% convinced in their own mind that they are going to be partakers in that glory. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be 100% sure. Not that we can't know, but that we are supposed to know. God's told us where we're going to be. If we remain faithful, what remains there for us? What remains for us if we remain faithful in the Word? Eternal life. There is no doubt if we serve a God that is faithful, and we know that God is faithful in all things, do we not? If we can't have faith in that, then we really don't have much faith in anything. So if we have faith in this, and I think we do, then God's saying, if you remain faithful to me, you will be a partaker. You've been washed in the blood of one whose blood continually cleanses us from sin. He's given us every assurance that we can possibly have that we are going to spend eternity with Him in heaven. Why is it then that we still feel that we're not quite sure? I don't know if it's because we're quite unsure of our own decency and goodness. I certainly hope it's not because we doubt God's ability to forgive us of sin, or that we doubt the efficacy of Christ's blood, because that's not. If we can't have faith in that, then we're backing up. We're not going forward. Okay, we're supposed to be positive of where we're going to. And Peter here says, "I'm a partaker. It's a foregone conclusion. Okay? I'm a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. And here, in verse 2, he starts giving them the admonition, what he wants them to do. He says, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. The brethren that are entrusted to your care, shepherd them. Now, what does that mean in the truest sense of the word, to shepherd the flock? If he's talking to these elders, he's talking to these shepherds. He says, shepherd the flock that is among you, that you are part of, that you have oversight over, shepherd them. What does that mean? What does that fall to them to do? Okay, that's part of it. What else? Guide them. What's that? Take care of them. Watch for the evil, right? Sin comes knocking at the door. Elders need to be always vigilant, right? That kind of goes back to the first century shepherds of the flocks in the fields, right? They were always on guard. They were always watching, yes. Okay? Such as? What's a good example of that? No, the elders. Elders, not the shepherds in the fields, but elders. Yeah. Okay. I look at some of the simple things. You know, sometimes it's the simplest things that we oftentimes overlook. We think that it's always a higher thing. Sometimes it's the simple physical things. In Scriptures it tells us, if there's anyone sick among you, let him what? Call the preacher? Call the elders. Let them go and do what? Pray over him, anointing him with oil. Okay? That was the job for the shepherds to do. That was part of their physical responsibilities to the flock. Not just know the names of the members, but to do the physical things. It would be the elder's job in the place of Jesus to tie the apron around their waist and stoop down and wash the feet. That's what Jesus did as a shepherd of his flock. I'm not saying that we need to have foot washing, okay? That's not what don't anybody go away from here and says Chuck's calling for foot washing. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is sometimes we limit the eldership to simply spiritual things when sometimes it's the physical things that lead to spiritual nourishment. So as Jesus was the one that tied the apron around and stooped down and washed his apostles' feet, washed the disciples' feet, it would fall to the elders to do that today if that were something to be done. Okay? Let who is first be least. Okay? Let he who is here be here. Humble yourselves. Work. So that idea, shepherd the flock that is among you. Now he gets this into the spiritual aspect of it as well. He says, exercising oversight. So again, this gives a sense of responsibility to the eldership, doesn't it? They have oversight. Overall, they have oversight over that congregation. Does that mean that an eldership is to be micromanaging the congregation, that everything that has to be done has to be, well, we got to make sure the elders, we got to run this through the elders? That's not real. I think what we're doing is we're putting into Scripture what's not in Scripture. Okay? It says you exercise oversight. It does not mean that you micromanage a congregation. Right? If there's a problem between two brethren, when should the elders be brought into that situation between two brethren? When it's obvious that the two brethren are not able to work it out themselves. But what does that fall to the two brethren to do? To attempt to work it out themselves. If I've got a problem, if I'm in a congregation with an eldership, and I've got a problem, and somebody's done something or something's going on that I don't like, I don't immediately go to the eldership and say, hey, did you know what they're doing? The first thing I'm to do is to go to a brother or sister that I have an issue with. And it might not even be a problem, but it's certainly that first. We relieve the burden of our elders when we do that. It's a reason that so many elders get burnt out, because they feel that it's a constant. They're drawn into something that they really don't need to be drawn into it all the time. He says exercise oversight. So it does give them an imperative to have oversight over the local congregation. That's their job. All right. Same thing as the shepherd in the flocks would oversee the flocks. The shepherd in the church is supposed to oversee the flock. He says not under compulsion, and that simply means this: that whatever the work that they're doing is to be done willingly. They're not to be. They're not forced into this work. They're not. Their arms are not twisted to become an elder. And I've seen the end result of elders that pressure is brought to them to serve when they are not interested in serving in that capacity. Well, we really need you. Okay, I understand. Don't you want to? And all of a sudden the pressure is brought to bear. The arms are twisted, and pretty soon you have a man who finally agrees to it in an exasperated fashion, rather than saying, "I desire this work. I want to be an elder." Instead, it's I feel like if I don't, I'm given the impression the congregation's going to fall apart if I don't serve. We need you as a buffer between these two men. We need you as another voice of dissension between this group of people that seem to have they have complete control. We need somebody to kind of counter that. Those are all the wrong reasons to be an elder. Those are all the wrong reasons to be an elder, and we should never force or compel someone to be an elder that doesn't want the job. Right? Supposed to be doing it willingly and desire the work. Not just simply agree to it because they become exasperated and worn out by somebody asking. This is not a compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you. So this is God's plan. First he must desire the work. God's plan is that the elder wants to do that, not simply be compelled to. But he says here, not for shameful gain. Now that concept of shameful gain, what do you think that means? The idea of a shameful, a shameful gain. Okay. Shameful would be what? Anything that would be contrary to the will of God, right? Anything contrary to God's pattern is shameful, right? Something that we would be embarrassed. In 1 Timothy 3 and verse 9, I think it's verse 9. But he speaks of the idea of not being greedy for dishonest gain, and that leads directly into it. There certainly is the potential, at least during this period of time, and I imagine certainly today, the idea of being able to gain something from it. Not always financial. That's not always a financial gain. It could be something else. It could be a desire for power, a desire for authority that's not theirs to have. And that idea of being greedy for something. And the problem with that is not just the idea that they might receive it, but the fact that that's where their heart is. Remember, that was the problem. Their heart led them to this, leads them to this idea, this desire, and then you have an elder whose heart is not right. And that's a dangerous thing, to have a man in charge whose heart is not right with God. All right, so he wants them to make sure that they're serving in the capacity that they're serving, in the way that they're supposed to be serving it, with a willing heart, the way God wants them to serve. All right? Verse 3, and here's one that I think a lot of people have a bigger problem with, and it is oftentimes a problem in some congregations, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. In verse 3 it says, not domineering over those in your charge. Not domineering. Not some translations might say not lording it over. I don't know if anybody says that, lording it over. What is Peter warning about here in the eldership? What is he warning them against? What is he warning both the eldership and the congregation? The idea of domineering or lording it over. Okay. And what's the problem? But not only is that opposed to God's pattern, but what does that lead to? What's that? Okay. It may lead to a congregation that is unwilling to accept that man as an elder, and they balk at his authority, even when the authority is rightfully exercised. They have much less of a problem with the actual authority than they do with the man that's exercising it. So you've got that problem as well. All right. What else? What else does that do? You do have many times you might have a man that there's basically an eldership, but there's an eldership where there's a chief elder, right? In his opinion, he forces that opinion on not only the congregation but on the other elders in the congregation. He will bend them to his will, and you've got a problem there, don't you? That's why we have a plurality of elders instead of one. If we just simply wanted one, we'd go back to what the church became in the 2nd century, right? They left the idea of having a plurality of elders to having a bishop over a town. We've been talking about that on Wednesday nights. So then you have one man in charge, and that's a dangerous thing. Okay, That's one of the things that's good about the government that we have. We don't have one person in charge. We have checks and balances, and that's the way it's supposed to be. They're supposed to make sure that corruption doesn't just grab a hold and one person being able to dictate. We don't have a king, do we? Okay. We have a plurality of elders, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And they're not supposed to be domineering. What if the eldership as a whole has that mindset? What's the problem there? What is that? Okay, what? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. What's the problem with it? Certainly. We've talked about this before in the idea of the eldership and what the eldership is and what the authority that it has and the authority that it doesn't have. We have to be careful that it doesn't become that the eldership is not a bureaucracy that everything has to go through in order for anything to occur. That's not what the eldership is. That's why elders are called shepherds, right? They're not dictators. They're not kings. They're not lords. They are shepherds. And if you look at the way shepherds, the word's used for a reason. If you look at the way shepherds dealt with their flocks, how did they deal with their flocks? They cared for them, right? The whole point was to make sure that they were well kept, that their safety was maintained, that their physical needs were being maintained in the fields, and their spiritual needs are being maintained in the local church. Well, when you have men who have a heart for that type of leadership and that type of shepherding, then there's really no problem, is there? Okay, they lead gently rather than prod. They're not out there with electrical prods. They're leading them where they're supposed to go. They're taking them where they're supposed to go. They show that they care. That's why it's the idea of a shepherd tying an apron around his waist and washing the feet. The example there is the important thing. It shows that congregation that I'm your servant. I'm not here to run your life for you. I'm here to assist. I'm here to shepherd you. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah. He's got that staff had a crook. You pull him out of the water. What kind of an eldership would it be that the congregation knows that I may miss one Sunday, but if I miss a second one, I'm going to get a phone call. Not, where were you? But is everything okay? Are you all right? Are you sick? Is there problems? What can we do for you? And that mindset, the elders are not there to take attendance. That's not their job. Their job is to find out what is the need, what is the spiritual need of the congregant. What's going on? The flock needs to know that they're being cared for because the shepherd loves them, not because they desire to have control, that dishonest gain that we're talking about. All right? It says, not domineering over those in your charge, but being what? Being what? Examples to the flock. The elders act the way that they want the flock to act, right? That's what they do. They're examples to us. You want to know how to be an elder? You look at a good elder in action, right? You want to know how to care for the flock? You look at a good elder in action. You see how to do it, right? There's a reason that the elders were called from the flock that they served, right? We don't put a post in, we don't put out a classified saying elders needed, apply within. What do? We find men from within the flock, men who know the flock, men who love the flock, men who want to make sure that this congregation remains faithful. That's who we want to be as our elders, not somebody that we don't know. Yeah. Right? That's a man that really cares, doesn't it? And doesn't it make you feel good? I've seen congregations that have elderships that they would absolutely, they don't know what they'd do if something happened to them. They're so not just codependent, that type of thing, but they are so they love them so much, and they know that they are loved by them. All right, but the reason they do that is they're an example to the flock. They don't just domineer. They don't lord it over, some translations. They love, they care for, and they're an example to the flock. It is. It would be considered the lowest, in the household. You would send out the little boys. That's where they would train to be a service in the household, is you'd send them out with the flocks. Yeah, look who he called them from. Okay, look who he called them from. Because remember, he brought out all of his sons, and he said, "Is this the one? Is this the one?" All of these young men who were very close to their father and were older and ready and able. He says, "No. You have a son, David. Call him the shepherd." Really? That's who you're gonna take the king? That's going to be the king. That's what the Lord said. But look what he made of his people in Israel, or that became Israel. Took them out of Egypt. What were they? They were the shepherds. That's the job that the Egyptians didn't want to do. That was considered the lowest of the low. But here he does. He brings them up, and it can be a lonely position, and it should be a lowly position in that they are servants before anything else. Absolutely. All right. But look what he says. He says, and if you do this, look what happens. If you behave in this way, if you act in this way, if you shepherd in this way, if you're an example to the flock, if you do as I ask you to do, if you act as a shepherd as my son acted as a shepherd, what's going to happen? What does God say? Verse 4, and when what? The chief shepherd. Now who's the chief shepherd? I mean, that's pretty... Jesus Christ, right? He is the shepherd. When the chief shepherd appears, that glory that Peter says, I'm going to be a part of, I'm a partaker in this glory. When that glory appears, when Jesus Christ appears, what's going to happen? What happens to these elders? They were going to receive a crown of glory. My translation says you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Now, unfading is kind of what are you talking about? Well, if you remember then, if you participated in some sort of a contest of some sort, those who would win would receive a crown. Now, that was not a golden crown. That was reserved for the kings. They would receive the laurels, right? The laurel crown, the branches that would be twined to make a crown, and that would be the crown that you would receive to signify that you had completed the race or won the competition or whatever it might be. Well, what's going to happen to a crown that's made out of twigs and branches and leaves eventually? Yeah, it's going to go away. Eventually you're going to get tired of it. I look at it's like flowers, right? You leave them up there, you water them and you water them and you water them, and you realize the water's not going to help them anymore. And what do you do with them? You have to throw them away. I mean, that's really what happens. Here he says, you're not going to receive the kind of crown that's going to fade. You're not going to receive a physical crown that will eventually go back to the ground from whence it came. What kind of crown are these elders going to receive if they are faithful? It's it's a crown of glory, right? They're going to be crowned with glory. Here's the great thing, folks. The elders are going to receive a crown of glory if they remain faithful, if they do the job that God has entrusted them to do, that Jesus has set up forth for them in His kingdom, in the Lord's church. What kind of crown is the member going to receive if they remain faithful? Same thing. It's the same one. They've been given a job to do, and if they do it well, they will be crowned with glory. For the member who does not tire out the elder, for the member who makes their job a pleasure to serve, for the member that assists and doesn't gripe and complain over every little thing, if they're a pleasure to have the authority over, what kind of crown are we going to receive? Same one. All right? Because we've all remained faithful and we've done what has been entrusted for us to do from the beginning to the end. We've run the race same as them. We've competed same as them. We finished same as them. We remain faithful same as them. We get the same crown. Sounds like a win-win to me. I can't think of anything that would prevent me from wanting to do exactly what I've been told to do. Okay. All right. So then he changes course a little bit. Here he's talking to the elders. He's talking to the older men who have oversight over the congregation. Now he drops down. He says, likewise. In other words, in the same manner, or after the same manner, what? You who are younger, do what? Submit yourselves to who? The elders. Okay? We don't have elders in this congregation. I'm praying that we do. And if we do, We cannot say, well, we haven't had them for a while. I'm just not used to this. I'm not going to, it's going to take me a while. No. What do? We submit ourselves as, if someone's been put in a position of authority over us by God, by His Son, then we have no right to refuse that authority. Okay? No right to refuse that authority. If they've been given a job, then we've been given a job. All right? So he says, you who are younger, submit yourselves to their authority. Submit yourselves to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you. Now here he's speaking of all of you. Who's that? Elders, preacher, deacons, members, ladies, men, children, older folks. Doesn't matter. All of you what? Clothe yourselves, all of you, with what? Humility towards one another. So now this kind of puts it into a little bit of perspective here, right? So who's to have humility? Is it the younger people to the older people? Exclusively? Yeah, older people to the younger people. Men to the women. Women to the men. Children to the older folks. Older folks to the... We all submit ourselves with humility. And that idea of humility means simply what? It's humbleness, right? You before me. You before me. It's so easy to do that when you get to the door, right? You open that door. No, you go ahead. And we don't even think anything about it. It's just ingrained in us. You always hold the door. At least, in the South, I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country, but I know down here, you're taught, you hold the door open. You go in. I imagine that's pretty universal. I've been to other countries where they do that. So I think it's pretty universal. We think about that. And it's just like, yeah, absolutely. It's nothing to us. But then when it comes down to us, how we behave towards one another, sometimes we balk at that, though, don't we? The idea of you before me. I'm right. We talked about that this morning. I appreciate Larry bringing that up, that idea of in 1 Corinthians where he was talking about the meat, right? And they were using food to promote themselves above one another. I can eat meat and my conscience is not bothered. You can't eat meat because your conscience is bothered. Therefore, I am a superior Christian. I'm better than you. Because that meat doesn't bother me. I can eat it. I don't care who it was offered to. I know there are no other gods. I can eat that meat and it doesn't bother me. So they were using basic foodstuffs to create this strata or this dichotomy in the church. Us against them. And he says, your food is not going to recommend you to God. That's not going to happen at all. But that's what happens, right? When we don't show humility towards one another, we begin to have a feeling of superiority. My right supersedes anything that's going on with you. My right to do this supersedes anything else. Me before you. Well, aren't you glad that Jesus didn't say me before you? Where would we be if Jesus had said, no, me first? What would have happened? Where would we be now if Jesus said me first? We would be lost. He said, if I could call for a legion of angels and my Father would send them to me. So if he had said, me, I don't want to go to the cross, you first, I'm not going, I don't want to die, me, we folks would be absolutely, there would be nothing for us. There would be no salvation for us if Jesus had taken that attitude. But he didn't. Not only that, the night before he was put on the cross, he was the one that bent down and washed the feet of his disciples. And it was an example. This is what I want you to do to one another. This is how I want you to be towards one another. And when it says that we're supposed to clothe ourselves with humility, that's what we have to be willing to do. And he's not commanding us to wash feet, but he's certainly commanding us to humble ourselves to one another. And here's the thing. It only works if we all do it equally, right? You've always got that one or two people that, while everyone else is willing to humble themselves, you always have at least one or two that are like, not me. I'm going to take my place. I'm going to take mine first. I want mine before you get yours. So what you end up having is you have some who are willing to be humble and to have that spirit of humility, but then you have some that are what we would call takers and not givers. So then it's a lopsided type of affair. And then what happens? You have people who begin to begrudge. And then what people say is, well, if he's not going to do it, if he's constantly going to have his way before I have mine, then why in the world am I selling myself short? Why am I putting myself in that position? I'm going to get mine first. And then what happens to the congregation? What happens to the church when you have mindset like that? What does it end up doing? It corrupts the group, doesn't it? And pretty soon, again, just like in the world, everybody starts saying, me first. I want mine. You wait. I'm going first. I'm going first. All right? I liken it to the idea about when we have our fellowship dinners. If everybody, what would happen if everybody said, no, you first, no, you first, no, you first, no, you first? It'd be a pleasant thing, but nobody would get fed. But that's the way we're supposed to be. The idea of having to force somebody, sometimes we have to force people to the front of the line. No, you're our guest. No, I don't want to go. No, you go. And we're physically pushing to the front of the line. But they have to be forced to do that because their idea is, no, you first before me. That's the way we're supposed to be with one another. And that's what's told to us to be. Clothe ourselves with it. Put it on like a garment. It covers us up. That's what people are supposed to see on us. What do we see? I see what everybody's wearing. And if I see your humility, what do? Where's my heart going to be? More likely to be humble, right? I'm more likely to have humility as well. All right. But he says to clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another, for what God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And that idea of proud goes right back to the idea, I've said this before and I'll say it again, the idea of pride versus humility. Pride simply means unable to look down. Pride is always walking with your face tilted upwards, never being able to see what's down here. And people who are proud will stumble over everything because they can't see. They're not looking down. That idea of stiff-necked. You won't even humble yourself. You're never going to see what's around you because you always have your face tilted upwards, looking upwards, as if you're putting yourself on equal terms with God. Instead, we bow our heads, we look down, and what do we see? We see everything in our path. We see people, if you're walking and you're doing this, are you going to see the person that's laying here that's in desperate need, spiritually or physically? No, you're not going to see them because our faces are always upward. We're always looking up instead of looking down where we need to be. That idea of humble means simply we're able to bow our heads. We're able to acknowledge. Okay? All right, we'll go through a couple more verses and then we'll be done. He says, verse 6, he starts again. He says, humble yourselves, therefore, okay? Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you. So no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how difficult things are, if you are humble and you show humility, if you clothe yourself in the humility, at the proper time He may exalt you. Now, here we go. Is He speaking necessarily in this life? Is God exalting us necessarily going to be in this life alone? I think He will exalt us simply by including us in His people. I think He will exalt us simply by adding us to the Lord's church. But let's think about it in more of a long-term type of thing. All right? Eventually, God is going to exalt us, and how will He exalt us in the future? Because that's really what we're looking forward to, right? It may be good for the time, but I'm looking forward to something a little bit more permanent, right? Okay? Because I may receive it in this lifetime, but then again, it might be taken away. I'm looking for a time when God exalts me, and it will be forevermore. Okay? So how will God exalt us? Well, going back up to Peter, going back up to chapter 4, where he says, "I am a partaker in the glory." Okay, that's how we will be exalted. That's when and forevermore we will be exalted, is when we will be partakers in that glory that is going to be revealed. God will exalt us because He is going to call us home. We will be exalted because we have an inheritance in that home that's been prepared for us, a house not made with hands. That's the kind of future exaltation that I'm looking forward to. I may have the adulation of the world, but eventually that's going to be gone. I'm not going to have that forever. That's something that's physical and something that's temporary. I'm looking more for something that God exalting me than man exalting me. Okay? All right. One more. Casting all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. All right. This is something that I think it sounds good on in the printed word, but it's difficult to do, isn't it? How many times have we said, I'm going to cast my anxiety, all but this one. Okay? I'm going to give Him all of my burdens except for this one. I'm going to entrust him with everything going on in my life except for this. Why is that? Do we think it's because he can't handle it? What's the deal with that? Why do we give him certain things but not everything? Hold on now, everybody, not everybody at once. One at a time. Why do we do this? Why do we not give him everything? Instead, we give him some. Okay? Could be a lack of faith. He might ask us to do something that we're not willing to do. He says, I'm willing to take this burden away from you. However, you're going to have to do this. You know, Lord, take away my addiction to whatever. Let's just use that for an example. Lord, help me with my addiction to this. Okay, well, in order to do that, you have to divest yourself of the, yeah, I got to get rid of this. Is there any other way? You know, is there any other way that we could do this? Right? It reminds us of Naaman, right? I want to be healed of this physical flesh. All right, I got leprosy in my skin. I might die of this. Don't know what kind of leprosy he had, but it was a disease of the skin, and it was a problem for him. It was a deterrent for him. He says, I want to be cured of this disease in the flesh. All right, this is what you do. He says, okay, then I give you some money. No. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go to the Jordan River. I want you to dip in 7 times. Man, it sounds fantastic. That sounds easy. I'm heading right. What did he do? He went away and he was angry. He was angry at the guy. Why have I got to go to the Jordan? I got 2 rivers in my hometown. They're more beautiful. They're cleaner. Why can't I just... He says, I told you what to do. And you're going to complain about doing something as simple as going and washing down in the river. That's your problem with this. And many times I think that is maybe one of the reasons that we don't want to cast all of our anxieties on him is simply because we're worried that he might ask us and require something from us that we're not willing to give up. That's certainly a portion of it. I dare say both of those are good examples about why we don't do things. Maybe we don't want to burden him. We think that, you know, when we ask, this is too small, I should be able to handle this. This is too minuscule for God. God's involved in the big picture, right? You know, God's busy preventing wars and busy saving, you know, infant babies with cancer. And He's not worried about the little thing that I've got going on, this little nitpicky little detail that maybe this is something that I just need to be concerned about and I need to take care of. And we diminish God's concern for us. God says, I want you to throw all your anxieties. I can handle it. Throw all of your anxieties. Well, you know, I just don't know if that seems a little nitpicky and too puny to worry God about. Any of these are wrong. All 3 of these are wrong. He says, cast all of your anxieties on him. Don't leave it. Don't hold anything back. I'm ready and I'm willing. I've got the capacity, certainly, as God. I've got the capacity for any of it. You throw it on me, I'll handle it. I may tell you to do something that you don't want to do, but that's part of it. I'm going to cure you of what ails you. You just have to be willing to avail yourself of the cure, much like Naaman. Right? Until he went and did it, that leprosy still clung to his flesh. He was still leprous until he went down and did what he was supposed to do. He wasn't willing to completely self of the issue. Okay, we're going to stop there. We'll finish up chapter 5 next week and maybe get into 2 Peter. So, looking forward to that. All right, we're going to have a song of invitation, 382. Before we have our song of invitation, is there anyone who needs to partake of the Lord's Supper that was unable to this morning? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to have a song of invitation, and we invite you, if there's anything that we can do for you, we can pray for you, with you, whatever the need might be. We stand ready to do that. This is part of the idea of humbling ourselves. If someone can come up and humble themselves to the point where they want prayers for a condition that they've got, for some issue that they might be having, we certainly are willing to go to God on their behalf and show them that while they're willing to do that, we're willing to act as well. So we want to pray for you and with you. Let's stand and while we sing.